Hello, family. My name is Shirley Bogues, and I am one of the family historians. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Pasquotank County, North Carolina. I was raised in Camden County, North Carolina. I was married to the late Ronald Bernard Bogues, and we was blessed to have 5 children. The oldest, Ronald Bernard Bogues Jr. and his lovely wife Angela. Our second born was Corey Evans, the late Corey Evans, and our third child, the late Alan B. Bogues, and one daughter, the late Sharon Tamika Bogues. And last but not least, our baby son, Deacon Chavez Lavelle Bogues, and his lovely wife Gwen Bogues. We was blessed to have 3 grandchildren, Shabria Lynn Bogues, Mikhail Brendan Bogues, and Trayvon Rare, who's a state trooper. So we are thankful for that. Now I'm going to show you a picture of my mother, Sylvia Marie Evans Barnard. She was married in the Barnard family to the late Thomas Barnard. And they together had 1 son. But my mother was blessed to have 3 children. My oldest brother, Irvin Evans, the late Irvin Evans, and myself, Shirley Bogues, and baby boy, Douglas Barnard. Douglas have 2 children, Sharita Lene Barnard Blue, and Keenan Darrell Barnard. Sharita have 4 children, and Keenan has 2 children. Keenan also has a bonus daughter, and Sharita has also a bonus daughter. And Sharita is just become a grandmother. So Douglas Barnard, my brother, is married to Jennifer Walker Barnard. I have been researching this event for 43 years. It started in 1981. I was raised by my grandmother, Sylvia Barnard. We lived in a 2-story house. My grandfather, Charles Henry Evans, together they raised, they had 3 children, 2 passed away. And so they raised their daughter, Sylvia Barnard, which is my mother, along with Evelyn Spence and Elizabeth Gathers, who was her cousin Af's children. And she raised them up until they was grown. And she also helped them raise their children, who was Emma Jane Spence, Roosevelt Spence, and Edward Spence. We all grew up in a big house together, and we all was family. We grew up in a loving house. My grandmother was the sweetest woman I know. Very beautiful. We all called her Mama, and we called Daddy Daddy. So we had a very great childhood. My grandparents, Sylvia and Henry Barnard, also raised other children. Always lots of food around. My grandmother was a hardworking woman. She always worked and cooked a lot of food. She was the granddaughter of Reverend George Bain Spence. And her father was Will Spence, and her mother was Queen Nora Archer. Will Spence and Queen Nora Archer had 8 children. The first child, Eula Spence, and they had 4 girls and 4 boys. It was Eula, Elsie, Jane Spence, Ruth Spence, and my grandmother Sylvia Spence. The boys was Emmanuel Spence, that they called Fat, Valerie Spence, they called Ned, and William Spence, they called Bud, and George Spence, the baby boy, they called Honey. And they all lived and was raised in Camden County, North Carolina. Reverend George Bain Spence, let me tell you just a little bit about him. Reverend George Bain Spence was in the military. And he, in the military, he was paid 60 cents per day, $7.20 a week. He had 16 children. And he was married to Elsa Jane Whitehurst. In researching, I find that Reverend George Bain Spence family, his father was Edmund Proctor, and his mother was Sylvia Jennings Spence. Together they raised, they had 16, Elsa Jane Whitehurst and Reverend George Bain Spence had 16 children. I don't have the names of all of their children. But before I go, I would just like to show you a picture of my grandmother and grandfather. This is Sylvia and Henry Evans when they was younger. And a little bit older was Sylvia Spence and Henry. And I don't have a picture of Reverend George Bain Spence. But we also lived, I didn't live there, but they lived in this house. This was Colonel General Isaac Gregory's home in Camden, North Carolina. This house is now a historic home. And they lived there because my grandfather worked for the Gregorys. And at that time, they lived in that house. So I advise you all to continue to search your family roots. And you all have a blessed day. Bye-bye.